Right, welcome everyone. Wanted everyone to know that they're in the right place. We'll get started in just 2 minutes, right at noon.
Hey, everybody, just doing a mic check and video.
We can hear you.
Thank you.
Mayor Dyer, would you like to do a mic check?
I would.
All right,
Mayor
great.
Dyer, how are you?
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. How are you?
Hello, Mayor.
Ashley.
Hello.
I'm Daryl Steinberg. The video won't let me in and I want to be
We
seen.
can do that. We can fix that for you.
I must be seen.
Here we go. We'll just put one.
So I'm going to ask you, I have this crazy stuff going on outside my door. Can you hear?
I don't hear anything.
No,
You can't hear it
a little bit.
because I can, and it's driving me bonkers, but I think it's going to end here in just a bit. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, then.
Rachel, you'll tell me when you want us to proceed, please.
I will. If everyone wants to come back on the camera, we can get started. I'm gonna take myself off camera here. Thank you.
All right, we're right at noon. For our reporters who are here, we'll have statements by each of our mayors, and then we'll open it up to questions. So please raise your hand, and we'll be happy to get to you. We have a few more mayors that will be joining us. As you might imagine, schedules are always a challenge, but this is extremely important to us to come together as a group today to speak on the issue of homelessness funding from the state of California. And so we'll be a little dynamic in our order. I think mayors are prepared for that. But we'll, in the interest of time, we're at 12:01. Let's get started. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Todd Gloria, and I'm proud to serve as the mayor of the city of San Diego, as well as the chair of the California Big City Mayors Coalition. Big City Mayors is a bipartisan coalition of the mayors of from the state's 13 largest cities, representing nearly 11 million Californians. Today, we're here together to make a few brief comments as we discuss, again, homelessness funding in the state of California. We're here today to call on Governor Gavin Newsom and the state legislature to include in next year's fiscal budget full funding for the Homelessness Housing Assistance Prevention Program, otherwise known as HAP. We are asking our state leaders to continue funding this critical program at the same level as last year, specifically $1 billion. I want to put it very succinctly. HAP is a lifesaver. For the past 5 years, it has funded programs and facilities in cities up and down the state of California to get unsheltered residents off of our streets and into care. It helps connect people to care that they need and get on a path to long-term stable housing and a better quality of life. Thanks to the state's investments through HAP into our cities, tens of thousands of people have come off the streets for good. A report by the Big City's mayors released just last month showed that since the state began making these major investments in homelessness, California's 13 largest cities created more than 15,000 shelter beds. Our programs have served nearly 150,000 Californians, and we've placed more than 42,000 people into temporary or longer-term housing programs directly from these shelters. I can speak from San Diego and tell you that HAP funds represent 60% of our shelter beds and 90% of our safe parking program, which serve people who are currently living in their vehicles. Since I became mayor just 3 years ago, we've placed more than 3,600 people into housing directly from our city's programs, which are largely HAP funded. Let me also share today that here in San Diego, our point in time count numbers were just released earlier this morning. They indicate that our sustained focus on expanding interventions are actually helping to turn the tide in our city. After several years of substantial increases in our count to the tune of around 20% just last year, as we put new shelters and programs into place, these numbers are finally leveling off. We are seeing the exact kind of results that we were hoping for from all of this investment, and we cannot abandon this progress now. My colleagues will tell you more about how HAP is making a difference in their cities. But today, our collective message is very simple. Without HAP, the progress that we were making will vanish. Shelters will be shuttered and vulnerable people will be sent back to the streets. Outreach workers who connect unsheltered people to housing and specialists and treatment programs will be gone. Unsafe and unsanitary tent encampments will proliferate on our sidewalks and in our green spaces because despite our efforts to enforce, the people living in them have nowhere to go. Safe parking lots will close and individuals and families who live in their cars will be forced to park in residential neighborhoods. In short, it will be a disaster. For the past 5 years, the governor and the state legislature have rightly made addressing homelessness in California a top priority, and they've backed up their words with the resources that we need to tackle this humanitarian crisis playing out on the ground in cities like ours. Local governments have augmented the state funding with funding of our own to make sure that we're funding creative and innovative programs tailored to our unique services. To our state leaders, we say, this is not the time to take our foot off the gas. Now is not the time to reverse the progress that we have made. We often say that budgets are a statement of values and priorities. In San Diego, we are facing a $170 million budget deficit, and we have to make some tough choices down here to balance our budget. But even still, I'm proposing to increase our budget for homeless services with a plan to add another 1,000 shelter beds and 200 safe parking spaces. And we're asking the state to continue to do the same. My fellow mayors and I will be the first to acknowledge that solutions to homelessness are expensive. But you want to know what will end up being far more costly? Not funding those same solutions. And that's why we're coming together today to urge the state leaders to include in next year's fiscal year budget full funding for the Homelessness Housing Assistance and Prevention Program. That is our ask today, and I'm pleased to make that introductory comments. We'll toss it now to the next mayor who is already here, the mayor of the city of San Jose, Matt Mahan.
Thank you, Mayor Gloria. Thank you all for taking the time to be here today for this important conversation. There are 9,239 stories I could tell you today from 9,239 people in San Jose alone whose lives have been changed by HAP dollars. That's 2,500 people brought directly in off the streets and into interim housing placements, and 6,739 people prevented from falling into homelessness in the first place. These are the stories that need to be shared. They show the impact of these dollars beyond the data and behind the numbers. There's Jaime, who lost all of his immediate family members in the span of a decade, lost his family home, and found himself with no one to turn to. Jaime then spent another decade on the streets, struggling with a drug addiction before San Jose's first tiny home community, made possible by HAP dollars, saved his life. Now he has his own apartment and a stable job. There's George, who lived on the streets of San Jose in an RV for years before a quick build community funded by HAP dollars changed his life, giving him the support he needed to get a job and the time he needed to save for an apartment. There's Christy, who worked her way through our San Jose Bridge program, getting paid to clean up the city while living in one of our HAP-funded tiny home communities and completing a program to become an electrician. There's Juan, who took advantage of the substance abuse treatment offered at our interim housing communities, got clean, and is working to see his two-year-old daughter again someday. We can't stop helping people like Jaime, George, Christy, and Juan. We can't stop trying to do better for our entire community. It's not only the right thing to do morally, it's the right thing to do fiscally and environmentally. We are spending tens of millions of dollars each year just to leave people like Jaime, George, Christy, and Juan to suffer on our streets with no support. We need help to get them off the streets. We need the state to continue investing in what works. Like so many other cities, as Mayor Gloria just mentioned, San Jose is finally turning the corner on unsheltered homelessness, and we're seeing it in the data. Last year, we measured a 10.7% decrease in the number of people living in unsheltered conditions in our community, thanks largely to the targeted and effective investments made possible by HAP. For the good of those who are suffering and our collective quality of life, we need to preserve this immensely strategic investment in bringing about rapid and effective solutions to unsheltered homelessness. Now I'd like to turn things over to my colleague, Mayor London Breed, who leads just at the other end of the bay here and is grappling with the same challenges because these are regional and statewide issues. She too has been advancing creative and effective solutions thanks to HAP funding. Mayor Breed.
Thank you, Mayor Mahan, and thank you to our chair, Todd Gloria, for bringing us together to talk about this incredibly important issue. It has been a top priority of mine to address the homelessness crisis we are facing in our city, as it has been for all the mayors who are joining us here today. Since I came into office in 2018 here in the city, we have drastically expanded our shelter capacity. It has increased by more than 60%. And during this time, we've helped over 15,000 people exit homelessness. That's 15,000 people that without our investment would otherwise be on the streets without a roof over their heads. Locally, we are investing in shelter, permanent supportive housing, new homes, navigation centers, and more. And city dollars have certainly played a big role in these efforts. We invest more than $130 million locally every year into our city's shelter system. But the reality is that HAP has also played a significant role. From 4 rounds of HAP funding, San Francisco has received more than $114 million for homelessness. 950 of our shelter beds are funded, at least in part, by HAP dollars. During our COVID emergency response period, this funding helped support our shelter-in-place hotels and is still supporting our city's navigation centers. Despite all of these investments, we still have a lot of work to do. Locally, our street homelessness has reached a 10-year low, but our family homelessness has increased. We need all of the resources we can to address these issues. People in our city and across our state deserve shelter. We have made progress, and without HAP funding, we risk slipping backwards, losing all the progress we've made and the momentum we have built, and leaving pockets of folks in our communities without a safe, affordable place to call home. We don't want to go backwards. That's why we're all here today. And we are hopeful that in this budget process with the state, we can see an investment of HAP funding so that we can continue the great work that we're doing all over the state of California. And now I'd like to introduce the mayor of Fresno, Mayor Jerry Dyer.
Well, thank you very much, Mayor Bree. And the number one issue in Fresno, as with everyone on this call, is the issue of homelessness in our cities. I hear far too often from critics that we are not making a difference in our efforts to combat homelessness. And this is simply not true. Here in Fresno, I can state emphatically that we are succeeding. I see the difference every single day, and HAP dollars are the key to this success. Project Home Key dollars and our nonprofit partners help, but HAP money is at the foundation of our success in terms of dealing with homelessness. Specifically, during the last point in time count, Fresno reduced its homeless population by 5.6%. In the last 3 years, Fresno has successfully moved over 7,000 unsheltered people off of our streets, with more than half of those being permanently housed and no longer living a life of homelessness. Currently, HAP money funds 414 shelter beds in Fresno, and that is 57% of the city's total shelter beds. Last June, the city provided HAP funding for 30 beds at a newly converted center, which we refer to as Clarion Point. Since the start of that program, Clarion Point has successfully placed 27 of those individuals into permanent housing. These individuals are continuing to receive ongoing housing stability case management, which will prevent a return to homelessness. The ongoing success of Clarion Point demonstrates the effectiveness of targeted efforts in addressing homelessness and providing stable housing solutions. And these are just a few examples of what HAP money has meant for Fresno. And without that money, we will not only lose our momentum as a city, but the incredible progress we have made will be severely eroded. Our Project Home Key operating subsidies begin to run out this year, which means that more shelter beds are planned to be funded by HAP beginning next year. And without continued HAP dollars, more than 500 beds would go offline, leaving fewer than 300 shelter beds for the entire city of Fresno. In short, this would devastate Fresno's progress toward ending homelessness. And the simple fact is, no HAP, no success in any of our cities. And now it is my honor to be able to introduce to you the mayor of Sacramento, Darrell Steinberg.
Darrell, before you go, Mayor Dyer, forgive me, Mayor Bass has joined us, and as you know, as our protocol, we try and go in order. Mayor Bass, may I toss it to you, and then you can hand it back to Mayor Steinberg?
Oh, sure. Sure, absolutely. Well, thank you, Mayor Gloria, for your leadership in leading the big city mayors and all that you do in the city of San Diego. I want to start off by thanking the state legislature and the governor for supporting the California big city mayors in our efforts to address housing and the homelessness crisis in our individual cities and together as a coalition. We have made great strides. In Los Angeles, 1,000 more Angelenos came inside last year than the year before, and we have more than 15,000 units of affordable housing that are being expedited as we speak. But we cannot stop this progress, which is why I'm joining my fellow mayors today in this call to our state partners to restore funding to HAP in the state budget. The state dollars we get from this program are critical in our efforts to provide interim housing and services that permanently house thousands more. In Los Angeles alone, more than 5,000 shelter beds are at risk without these funds. The state has been an invaluable partner, especially the Los Angeles delegation in the Assembly and the Senate, and we need our partnership with the state to continue its commitment to helping us urgently confront and ultimately end the homelessness crisis. We can't afford anything but progress in confronting this issue, and without this funding, lives are literally at risk. So again, I want to thank Mayor Gloria for bringing us all together today. And with that, I would like to introduce and bring on my colleague, friend, and mayor of Sacramento, Darrell Steinberg. You are muted, my friend.
Thank you, Mayor Bass. Thank you, as always, for your friendship, partnership, and making the case so strongly. Same to Mayor Gloria. Thank you for pulling us together, and all my fellow mayors. I want to begin as well by thanking the governor and the legislature for being champions for HAP. Remember, we worked with first Governor Brown, but then elevated this with Governor Newsom. The first direct allocation to cities of funding for homelessness. And they have been great champions, both the governor and the legislature, and they face a significant state deficit. And Mayor Bass and I, and Mayor Gloria, we know a little bit about those deficits because we dealt with the worst deficit in state history back in 2009 and 2010. We know that resolving the deficit is imperative, but we had a philosophy back there back in those days that we largely lived up to. And that is, when you cut, and you have to cut, make sure you don't cut things that are literally life and death. And we saved more of the safety net than not, even though during those very, very difficult times. So resolving the deficit is imperative, but so is not going backwards on attacking the homeless problem. there have been some audits and some controversy around these sets of issues and what demonstrates progress and what doesn't. And I wanted to use the remainder of my time to sort of do just a very short, what I call myths and facts, because I think there's some myths out there that need to be addressed head on and set aside. First of all, there are some who say that, well, 5 rounds of HAP funding have not produced fewer homeless individuals, therefore HAP is not effective. Well, we know that more people are entering homelessness than we're getting off the streets, but that isn't the fault of HAP. In fact, how much worse would it be without HAP? The fact is that California's big cities have used HAP funding to stand up 15,772 shelter beds that are full, all of them, on any given night. Without these beds, nearly 16,000 additional people would be homeless. That's the reality. Myth. HAP funding to cities is not getting people out of emergency shelter and into housing. Here's the reality. The 13 largest cities have used HAP money to place 42,215 people into temporary and permanent housing. And we can cite many examples of how we add up to that large number. Myth. Since voters passed Proposition 1, future rounds of HAP are not necessary. Well, we were all huge proponents of Prop 1 and very glad that it passed, but it's very specific. It cannot be used on the bond side for emergency shelter or housing. And most of the money under the BHSA, the former Mental Health Services Act, goes directly to our county partners, not to the cities. 2 more. Myth. Cities have not set goals for using the HAP funding to reduce unsheltered homelessness. Not true. In collaboration with the Newsom administration, the 13 largest cities have obtained state approval for plans to set aggressive accountability goals. Specifically, we are committed to reducing unsheltered homelessness by 16% by 2025 and greater reductions after that. And finally, somehow that cities can maintain the same level of effectiveness and effort without HAP funding. Myth. The reality is that these dollars are going directly into the beds that allow us to shelter people. And so deficit reduction imperative, but we implore the legislature and the administration to find a way to fund HAP 6 so that this immensely successful investment in California cities can continue to make the progress that we're beginning to see in all of our cities. Thank you. I'll now turn it over to my colleague, the great mayor of Bakersfield, Karen Go. Karen.
Thank you, Mayor Steinberg, and thank you for your leadership more than 7 years ago in uniting this bipartisan coalition around homelessness. Homelessness remains California's #1 issue. Mayors have underscored its gravity. Our residents trumpet this crisis daily, and the streets of California cry out with the pain of thousands. HAP funding has indeed changed the futures of our city's most vulnerable. In Bakersfield, HAP-funded programming has moved 528 individuals from the streets into permanent supportive housing. But much crucial work remains to be done. Lean budget years require difficult decisions. Addressing homelessness, our state's #1 issue, must be a priority. If not now, then when? Together, cities hold ourselves accountable for this scourge on our Golden State. We're taking action. Cities, as you've heard, have made progress. Big city mayors have led in implementing effective solutions in changing the plight of tens of thousands. With HAP investments, more than 150,000 persons who were perishing on California streets have found refuge through shelter, through housing and services. In the city of Bakersfield, we've not only tripled our shelter beds, but in recent years, we've more than doubled the production of affordable housing units. Our city has increased the number of permanent supportive housing units by 282%. HAP funding recently financed a 70-unit encampment resolution fund project that will move individuals directly from encampments into permanent supportive housing. These numbers aren't mere statistics. They represent changed lives, lives with hope made possible through the investments of our state, through the investments of our cities. HAP funding has transformed the life of Cecilia and her son Ezekiel. From hopelessness and homelessness, the family found emergency shelter. They're now in permanent supportive housing, permanently housed. Cecilia graduated recently as a medical assistant, and Ezekiel, who was treated for behavioral health challenges, is now excelling in school. HAP funding has changed the future of this family forever. Despite the unrelenting efforts of our cities, much work remains to be done to find lasting solutions. The scope and scale of our mental health, substance use, and housing crisis have demanded that cities take unprecedented action. The enormity, the urgency of this crisis far exceeds the capacity of allocated HAP dollars. As you've heard from my colleagues, big cities are literally investing our own general fund dollars. In Bakersfield, more than 80% of our homeless programming is supported by funds other than HAP. We need HAP funding. If we don't continue to invest now for the many other Cecilias, the many other Ezekiels, then when? Sadly, more people enter homelessness than cities have the capacity to serve. To end homelessness, we must stop the inflow. Cities look to Sacramento to build upon the progress made by Care Court, by SB 43, and other legislative solutions. As we wait to see the results of these reforms to materialize, much of the responsibility to triage this crisis falls to cities. The human suffering of this crisis cries for stable investments and policy changes to address the root causes of our state's #1 challenges. This challenge we must face now. If now, then when? If not now, then when? California cities need dependable, flexible funding and bold policy reform. We call upon the state to continue to support cities as together we seek sustainable, systemic change to end California's paramount crisis. And now it's my pleasure to introduce, from the happiest place on earth, Anaheim Mayor Ashley Aiken. Mayor Aiken.
Thank you very much, Mayor. And thank you, Mayor Gloria, for convening us all today. I just want to emphasize that cities have played and must continue to play a leading role in tackling homelessness. As we know, we are often the first and sometimes last line of defense. And in Anaheim, HAP has helped us fund an aggressive action plan that has helped us demonstrate both accountability and success that we believe is a model for other cities in California. While we're not immune and homelessness is growing both across our region and the state, in Anaheim, we are seeing our sheltered population and those connected to permanent housing grow. And HAP has played, and hopefully will continue to play, a critical role in our success. Anaheim has demonstrated that our programs are both efficient and effective. We have local work programs helping people get connected with employment. We have life-saving street outreach teams and our street medicine teams that are helping people get connected and get healthy enough to enter permanent and emergency shelters. We have our shelter community, our rapid rehousing programs, as well as with HAP funding, converting hotels into permanent supportive housing. HAP has helped us expand daily outreach by our social workers who are out there in Anaheim every day and night, 7 days a week. It has helped us convert 2 motels into permanent supportive housing that alleviates and prevents future homelessness. And to help some of our most vulnerable, HAP is providing shelter and support for our at-risk youth in Anaheim through a new transitional youth shelter. Anaheim hosts the most unsheltered people in Orange County with a 325-bed emergency shelter, a 200-bed county shelter, as well as partnerships with our faith and our community partners that are out there doing the Lord's work every day. And HAP is helping us fund innovative programs with our courts to better address those in need of help by offering treatment and case management as an alternative to sentencing in jail. Anaheim has proven to be a great return on investment for California HAP funding. And we are investing right alongside our state partners, spending tens of millions of dollars a year in our general fund to address homelessness here in Anaheim. For all we've achieved, we are now in our most difficult stages as we address those struggling with mental health and substance use disorders and those that are the most resistant to services. But Anaheim gladly accepts the challenge. Prioritizing homeless funding is one of the easiest choices that we can make as a city and California can make as a state as we both confront difficult budget decisions. But please let me emphasize, now is not the time to cut and run. Cities are the only effective solution to rapidly responding to this homeless crisis. And we must build on the gains that Anaheim has made and those of my other fellow mayors have made on behalf of their citizens to address this issue. And so I'm hoping that with working with our state partners and the governor's office, we can work with mayors to make sure that we have this funding in the future. Thank you so much for your time. And it is my pleasure to introduce fellow Mayor Patricia Locke Dawson.
Thank you, Mayor Aitken. And, you know, as you've heard from all my colleagues here today, we're here today because we still have work to do. And the city of Riverside, like all cities entrusted with HAP dollars, is using local funding to offset and comprehensively and collaboratively approach homelessness in our city. HAP funding here has directly impacted lives. Some of my colleagues have had their own stories, but I'll tell you about Mr. Kevin Johnson. So Kevin, I just want to share a little bit more about him. He was born in Fresno, Mayor Dyer, but he moved to Riverside when he was about 4 years old and has spent most of his life here. In 2002, he became homeless and he took up residence in the Santa Ana River bottom for 21 years. 21 years he was homeless. He's 66 years old now, and he struggled for years recovering from substance misuse. It wasn't easy, but after multiple efforts to engage Mr. Johnson, the City of Riverside's outreach team has finally secured housing for him and his 2 emotional support animals. This would not have been possible without HAP funding. After experiencing homelessness for 21 years, our rental assistance program, Critical, funded by HAP, saved Kevin's life. Now, if we lose HAP funding, we'll lose people like Kevin and hear less success stories like his. You know, we cannot afford that as a city, as a community, and as a society. You know, in Riverside, for every person housed, 6 more become homeless. Losing our ability to house people with HAP funding will make this inflow-outflow issue exponentially worse in all of our cities, not just Riverside. California's big city mayors are on the front lines of this issue. We need every tool in our tool belt to continue this work. Working with the state, we've shown that we are all in on these efforts. We've submitted detailed and ambitious homeless action plans in collaboration with our county partners. And continued HAP funding is critical to our progress, including our efforts like ending youth homelessness in the city of Riverside, where we have seen more than a 68% decrease in this last year alone. We welcome accountability. We welcome the accountability necessary to get this job done. And in fact, in Riverside, we implemented our own dashboard on our own to monitor our progress. We found that we've housed more than 1,500 people with HAP in this last year. And without this funding, we'll see 500 more people turned away to live life on the streets. So I want to thank the governor and our legislature, my fellow big city mayors. I appreciate standing here all with you today, and our fearless leader, Mayor Gloria, so that we can achieve the shared goal of getting all Californians off the streets and into homes. Next, I want to introduce the mayor of the great city of Irvine, my friend, Mayor Farrakhan. Mayor Khan.
Thank you, Mayor Lagdasson. You know, the city of Irvine is committed to providing assistance to people experiencing homelessness and implementing programming that reduces the number of people who become homeless each year. We recognize the urgent need for additional bridge housing in the South Service Planning area, particularly in Irvine. We have a clear and actionable implementation plan that utilizes every dollar of HAP rounds 4 and 5, including the acquisition of real estate in May of 2024, selection of an operator, and launch of services by summer of 2025. We are confident that this timeline, coupled with the dedication of the city's health and wellness team, will ensure the successful realization of bridge housing and shelter projects. This plan will be in severe jeopardy without continued HAP funding, with a high degree of likelihood that our bridge housing will be delayed without this funding. Our data indicates the city still has 120 homeless individuals who have actively sought services, with the exponentially larger number that could be at risk of becoming homeless. Eliminating funding tied to HAP will significantly and adversely impact our ability to meet the current needs of these at-risk populations. And therefore, I support, along with our big city mayors, the need to continue HAP funding. And I thank everyone for being here today and turn it back to our chair.
Thank you, Mayor Khan, and thank you to all my colleagues for your comments. To members of the press, we're happy to take some questions. Let me just conclude. I want to make sure you heard loud and clear from my fellow colleagues just in the last few moments. We welcome accountability, and we've heard our governor loud and clear. These are precious public resources, and the public deserves to know what they are getting for their limited dollars. We welcome the accountability, and we will happily be held to account for how these funds are spent. But our message today is do not retreat. Send us the funding that allows us to work to address the greatest crisis facing our state today. And I'll conclude with this. From our state's own Interagency Council on Homelessness, they released a report on Friday on the efficiency and effectiveness of HAP. And I will quote directly when I read this here. They say the number of Californians accessing services indicates that the investments in solutions, such as those funded by HAP, have created more opportunities to expand local programs, reach more people year over year, and achieve deeper penetration of services throughout communities. That is the state's own folks that are mentioning and acknowledging how effective this is. That's why we must maintain this funding, and that's why we're here together today. Again, thank you to the mayors who made their comments. Happy to throw it open for questions. Just ask folks to raise hand, and our Zoom friends will make sure that you get on air. Are there any questions for the mayors? I always know I find it difficult to find the raise my hand button too, so I'll give folks just a few more seconds. I do know our comments were extensive, so hopefully you get the gist of what we're hoping that the governor and the legislature can do. I see we have one hand raised. Vic Jolly.
Governors, hopefully you can hear me. Thank you so much. for this news conference and opportunity to ask questions. I'm a reporter with the Sacramento Bee, and I just wanted to ask you. Sounds like you all cited numbers that would either zero out, programs that you already have, or cancel them, or at the very least, shrink them to a great degree without HAP funding. What would your suggestions be for the governor and the legislature, and any of you can tackle this, with Prop 1, which, as you said, you all support, but of course it serves a subset of people, targeted group of people, and doesn't broadly help with emergency sheltering. What would your suggestion be? How should the governor and the legislature reconcile the funding that is coming, and the governor has speeded up that funding, $3 billion of it going out sooner than later? How would you suggest they reconcile Proposition 1 funding with the broad funding that you all are talking about, the HAP funding?
Mayor Steinberg, I think you're probably our lead on that, but obviously any mayor's welcome to try to answer.
Sure. Well, Proposition 1 and HAP are complementary, and both are necessary. It's never been one or the other. Proposition 1 is a modernization of an existing revenue source, the millionaire's tax, known as the Mental Health Services Act, plus an additional $3 billion bond. But that has always been additive to HAP, in part, as I said earlier, because of the history. The cities have never gotten direct allocation of resources out of the Mental Health Services Act. It is all gone to the Health and Human Services subdivision of the state, the counties of California. So HAP was something new and different, and allowed the cities to have some direct authority over building beds at the pace that our public demands. And that's exactly what we have done with it. So cities need both. It's not one or the other.
Does anyone else want to chime in on that? I think y'all did a great, but Mayor Dyer?
Yeah, just to add, I agree that they are complementary, HAP and Prop 1, but not every person that's out on the street suffers a mental health condition. Some of the folks out on the street are addicted to some type of a substance, alcohol, drugs, or maybe they're out there as a result of going through some type of a life crisis. So, but that doesn't equate to a mental health condition. And Prop 1 is really specific to those that are facing a mental health condition. And so we do need both, and we need a HAP to support our ongoing efforts. And we also need Prop 1. And I would also say that Prop 1 is not going to be implemented overnight. We know that it's probably going to take 3 years before we see really the impact of Proposition 1 on the state of California. And these HAP funds are needed desperately, not only complementary afterwards, but to get us through the times that we face today prior to the implementation of Prop 1.
If there's no additional reporters want to raise their hands, I think we may be concluded. I'll just give another second for anyone who wishes to ask a question. If there are none, Vic, thank you for that question. Folks are always welcome to follow up with our individual staffs. Mayors, thank you again for your time today, and thank you all who participated and joined us today. Again, our message is very clear. Cities cannot do without HAP. We're counting on our governor and our legislature to continue their extraordinary leadership on helping us address this crisis, restore this funding in the fiscal year 25 budget, allow the cities to continue to do our work of getting people off the streets, saving lives, and addressing this crisis. Again, mayors, thanks for being here today. We'll see you all very soon.
Thank you all.
Thank
Have
you
a
all.
good
Thank you,
afternoon.
Gloria.